Thank you very much, Brother Portman, and thank you, church. I think if I recall correctly, you were the very first church to give us support. You were the first partakers. So thank you. And you have blessed us wonderfully. More than that is the friendship and the prayers and all the things. That's the things that are eternal and lasting also, and thank you. Almost 46 years ago, I came to this wonderful church, Apostolic Faith Church, at that time in Sturtevant, and took one of your beautiful, dashing young ladies away. And married her and took her back to Minnesota and took her immediately into ministry. And she has proved to be a incredible partner. And we weren't married very long before we were actually heavily involved in church planting. We started teaching home Bible studies, and home Bible studies led to more people getting home Bible studies, and it wasn't long that we had a group, and then that group became a church. And then after we had that church started, a number of years in, we started another church. We were doing two churches at once, 45 miles to the south. And we really developed a passion for church planting. When God called me to leave those two churches and go teach at the Apostolic Bible Institute, one of the things that the Lord spoke to me about is that with the experience that we had gone through in planting churches and the things that my wife and I had experienced, that we would be able to pour into the next generation and save them potentially 3 years of their life just by pouring into them the things that we experienced. From there, we went to Minneapolis and there became a co-pastor, and within a few years, with that passion within us, we then saw 3 daughter works planted out of the church in Minneapolis because it's in our DNA. But it didn't get into my DNA. How it got into my DNA is that my dad and mom, who were attending church in Cochran, Wisconsin, a town of maybe 400 or 500 people, in a beautiful church that was their little white country church. They left the community of a close-knit rural church to go from Cochran, Wisconsin to Winona, Minnesota, from a town of 500 to a town of 25,000 that still didn't have a United Pentecostal Church, and became a founding family, not pastor, they just went and left that church to be a founding family to help see a work started in Winona. I remember my dad most Sundays with our station wagon going and picking up people on the Wisconsin side of the river where we lived. Sometimes we would leave way before church, and he'd go long distances. Anybody that he could give a ride to church or take them to church, we would do. By the time my brother and sister and I were teenagers, we were already in a bus ministry, filling a bus, to try to fill as many children as we could into the Sunday school. That was passed on to me through the DNA of my parents, and it's been deep in our heart. Little did we know and little did we understand that a number of years down the road, after all of the processes of these things, that I would get a phone call from Scott Sistrunk, the director of North American Missions, asking for us to become the director of training for North American Missions. Again, what it was just a chance for us to take our experience and pour it into people. And so I started off as a contractor and then became the director of education for North American Missions. Total worked together about 7.5 years for North American Missions. We worked hard to create a good, solid curriculum. There is now a curriculum in all of our Bible schools with a pathway into church planting. Launch Conference is a very strong conference, United Pentecostal Church. It's the premier church planting conference to equip people. God's blessed us and allowed us to be a part of those things. Also seeing courses in ministry on Ministry Central put up, and then how to plant a church, 29 professionally cut videos on YouTube than anybody in the world can see on how to establish plant an apostolic church. With a foundation built, understanding others can build upon our foundation, my wife and I felt it was time for us to release what we were doing to someone else and take the things that we've experienced, and because of the fact of understanding, as we were sitting in a general conference service a year and a half ago, and Aaron Bounds was preaching, he was preaching on a window, that we have a window. And my wife and I looked at each other, and with tears in our eyes, we knew that we had a window, and it was time for us to leave headquarters and go back into the field. And in that service, God allowed me to see a vision of a field or a vast area, which ended up being southwestern Montana. And I saw fires, 7 fires that were burning, pulsating. And the whole thing was, as if you don't go, who will go? And so that began the first process. And even in that service, we're sitting in the front row because I'm an executive at North American Missions, and this is North American Mission Service. And my job in that service is everyone who comes up to respond to the message, to lay hands on them and pray with them and help them to get to the point, to the field, to plant a church. But the problem was my wife and I wanted to go to the altar ourselves because we were at that service feeling that call. And by the time a year and a half or so accomplished, I talked to my boss and expressed what I was feeling and shared with them the vision about a call to forward missions to the Rocky Mountain District. And if you can bring up the PowerPoint at this time. Forward missions is a reaching into uber rural areas of the United States where there are few churches. And it's looking for someone who can go in and plant multiple churches. And the view that Brother Sistrunk had is, let's revive the circuit rider, someone who can take those cities. Well, God had given us on a map, and we laid down the map, and we're able to identify 7 cities that God's given us. We'll talk about that. So forward missions is much like a metro missionary. To go into an urban core takes extraordinary effort. And it is best by funding a person to be able to go there and give their total focus, because it takes so much to start a work in an urban area. This is the same thought. We need people to go into these vast areas where there aren't anyone, to reach people and let them be free and funded so they can plant multiple churches without having to be bivocational. I've been bivocational at least 25 years of my ministry. And so I walked into my boss's office and I told him that we were going to be stepping down at the end of last year, and told him that we felt like God was calling us to the Rocky Mountain District to be forward missionaries. And instead of my boss getting angry, he started to weep. And he said, Brother Thompson, what you don't know is just last week, I had a man in my office who came from the Rocky Mountain District, who had been sent out there, had been ministering there, came into my office and said, Brother Sistrunk, you absolutely have got to get help for the Rocky Mountain District. You need a forward missionary. He said, I looked at that man and I said to him, I have been searching for 2 years and I can't find anyone. Why don't you go find somebody? He said, and then you walk in here now and say, God's calling us to be forward missionaries to the Rocky Mountain District. With tears in his eyes, he said, how can I do anything but put my blessing on it, because this is the fulfillment of what God had put in my heart. So as you see on the slide, it says forward RMD. So that gives you an understanding of what it means to be a forward missionary. It's someone who goes to the uber rural areas. Why the Rocky Mountain District? The Rocky Mountain District, as you can see on my right hand, your left-hand side, Montana, Wyoming, and Utah. Montana, Wyoming, and Utah, those 3 states make up the Rocky Mountain District. Their landmass together actually is a little more than 10% of the continental United States. 330,000 square miles of land, population of 5.2 million, but in 10% of the landmass of the United States, there are only 38 churches in 3 states. When you take a look at Montana, wide open. Wyoming is the state with the least amount of population. People spread out all over that state, mostly big ranchers and few churches. Utah is the desert for United Pentecostal churches. There are fewer churches per capita in Utah than any other state in the United States. At the time of our application, when we made our application, there were only 6 churches in the entire state of Utah, and 3 of them were in Salt Lake City. So we're going to help as we can, whatever we can, with the Rocky Mountain District. And the reason we say why, it's because it's targeted by the North American Missions as an under-evangelized area needing extraordinary effort. And we take a look at history. Who's going there? Who's going there since Azusa Street? There's still only 38 churches. Someone has got to go. And if not us, who will? Also, we understand that this idea of forward came from the terminology that was used in the era of the circuit rider. And it was what a man would say as he straddled his horse and put his Bible up and said, I am going forward to the next town. It came the byword of a statement of someone riding their horse to open a new work in another town. And it was the shout, forward. People don't understand that today. We're so far removed, but that's the history of where the term came. So forward, though, has its precedent in the New Testament, and it's the best way to reach the Rocky Mountain District. Next slide. In Mark chapter 6, verse 6, Jesus went about the villages in a circuit teaching. Jesus was the first circuit rider. He was a forward missionary. Nothing is new under the sun. Cities are worth saving, but villages are worth saving too. Next slide. We have an example in the New Testament about a circuit, the 7 churches circuit of Asia. John writes the letters to the 7 churches in Asia. Not only did John write to them, but also Paul wrote to some of these churches. And as you can notice, they may not make a perfect circuit, but there's a highway that goes between all of those. And the letters were circulated through those churches. And that became a circuit in that area of Asia. Also, next slide, the Second Great Awakening, which happened in the 1700s and the 1800s, in the late 1700s and the early 1800s, and almost going all the way to the 1900s. A revival that swept across Europe and swept across the United States was marked by circuit riders going out and taking it. Next slide. So why the Thompsons? This is not a matter of us tooting our horn. It's a matter of saying we feel a call and we feel equipped. And that's just what we're stating. We're experienced church planters. We've planted churches in a northern state, like Montana being a northern state, in the state of Minnesota. We planted 3 churches there, both rural and urban. We've been sent by the Missouri district because I was working at headquarters and was a minister in the Missouri district, and we have to be sent by a district. So we approached the Missouri district. Will you send us? And unanimously, they sent us. We then had to be reached by the Rocky Mountain District, and we had to be accepted and interviewed by them, and they accepted us. We have some knowledge and resources and the experience of training, and being the fact that I was NAM's Director of Education, and we want, with the passion that we have for reaching souls and planting churches, we want to go and to do what God has called us and what we've done our entire life just one more time. So why, in our next slide, our focus is going to be southwestern Montana. You see the black square, then the inset that's off to the left-hand side of it. That is just one quadrant of the vast state of Montana. And that quadrant, more than 3 times the size of the state of Connecticut, where distance is measured in hours, not miles, has only 2 churches in all of that vast area. So thinking about it, 3 times the size of the state of Connecticut, just 2 churches. Next slide. One of those churches is a North American Missions church on North American Mission status, just recently planted, and that was planted by my son, Nathan. There's only one other established church in that entire quadrant, and that is a church that's just outside of Bozeman that's been there for several decades. Why there? There's a population growth area and also a concentration in that area. Gallatin County, which is the county seat, is Bozeman, is the fastest growing county in Montana. Since 2019, it's seen a 25% growth. And that area has been completely inundated with people since COVID trying to escape from places to get into the wild, and it has been poured into by people from California. Next slide. There are cities that we have selected, and I told you the fires, and you can see the marks that are on there, and I know that this is at a distance and it's hard for you to see, but starting over in the top right on Interstate 90, coming across the center of Montana, the first city is Livingston. Livingston, the next one is Bozeman and Belgrade. Then along up the Interstate 90 is Butte. Way out, almost to the Idaho border, is Anaconda. Coming down on the western side in Interstate 15 is Dillon, and all the way back around down the bottom is West Yellowstone. Those are the cities where God has directed us. And in those 7 cities, including Bozeman, because the church is actually in Four Corners, there's not a church in any one of those 7 cities. Let's take a look at the 7 cities. Livingston, next slide. Livingston is the gateway to Yellowstone. Livingston is 8,000 people. It is 45 minutes to the nearest church. Next, let's go on to Bozeman and Belgrade. We know that there is a church there. It is known for skiing. It is an eclectic type of city. Bridger Bowl, Red Lodge, world-class fly fishing. It is a magnet. The airport in Bozeman is the biggest airport in Montana, even bigger than in the capital city. It is an attraction to the west. 100,000 people in the metropolitan area and just one church. Moving 76 miles to the west is Butte, 35,000 people. 76 miles to the nearest church. Butte is known as that butte, meaning a butte, literally a butte, is known as the richest hill on earth. One time, Butte was the largest city west of the Mississippi during the gold and the silver rushes. Gold, silver, and copper is what is mined there. 25% of the world's copper comes from Butte, Montana. It's a city that's very dark with a dark history and desperately needs a church. Just to show you how God is working, since we have been called to this, my daughter-in-law, Skasha, whom probably a number of you have met, my son's wife, she lives in Ennis. She lives in, I'm going to guess, probably 75, 80 miles. It's over an hour, probably an hour and 15 minutes to Butte. She travels to Butte every week because she has an open door and she's teaching a Bible study in Butte. Not only that, but we received a phone call from Ryan Shoppy, who is the man for the Rocky Mountain District who's over their Facebook page. He called me up. He said, Brother Thompson, he said, is Butte one of your target cities? I said, absolutely. He said, well, we just got a Facebook reach out from somebody who asked us, when are you going to plant a church in Butte? He researched it and he found out this man was a graduate from Jackson College of Ministry, which has been gone for several decades probably, but there's a man who had evidently took a job transfer into that city and is looking for an apostolic church. Next slide is Dillon. Dillon is 5,000, but there is not another city anywhere in that whole western edge. It draws for hundreds of miles into that area. It's an old west city, a rodeo town, and a college town, 71 miles to the nearest church. Next slide, West Yellowstone, 1,200 people, 71 miles to the next church. Then take us to the next slide, Anaconda. Anaconda is the 9th largest city in Montana with 9,500 people. It is 100 miles to the nearest church. So how are we going to do this? What's our priority? We're going to, first of all, go, thank you, next slide, where the doors open. The logical thing for us to follow is to follow the pattern that Paul had in the New Testament. Look at the major cities out of which you can reach the surrounding areas. The county seats are Bozeman, Butte, Dillon, and Livingston. All of those are targeted cities. Next slide. Our plan is prayer. We cannot do anything without prayer. Our only hope is to simply walk in the Spirit and let God open the doors and speak wherever he directs us. We need your prayer covering. We need to pray. We need your prayer support. And thank you for your financial support. We're going to pray up, build, and train teams. We cannot stay and pastor 7 churches simultaneously. At one point in time, I pastored 2 churches simultaneously, and that was more than I could handle. Our goal is not to do that, but to raise them up and to raise up teams and turn these churches over. How are we going to do it? Just like you would. This is how you reach a soul, how you start a Bible study, how you start a church. You frequent places within the community. You start making some connections. You build relationships. You teach a home Bible study. You convert and disciple a soul. You develop them into leaders, and you release them to lead. They start as a sinner. You move them to a saint. You turn them to a pillar. Then you turn them into a leader, and you release them. And we're going to journal the process for future circuit riders. And maybe that will be someday one of your children. This is what God's called us to do. And we just wanted to share with you. Why would we leave? And why would we do it? Because it's in our heart. And if we don't go, who will go? Amen. Thank you. And again, thank you for being our first and greatest supporters. I'd like to invite my wife, who is with me in this journey, to come and minister to you tonight. I count it an extreme honor. She's a very godly woman. I prayed a list of things that I would have in a wife. My wife, God answered every single of my prayer requests in her, and I'm very grateful for her love for me and our family, and her love for God, and her heart for missions and the ministry. Let's give her our attention and welcome her to the pulpit.
Thank you so much. It is truly an honor to be with you and to be home again. I always call this home because it is home. And I appreciate the fact that the gifts were present tonight. Thank you. That was a wonderful thing that God did. He offered the gift of healing. And I pray that every one of you that needed it afforded yourself the opportunity to come up, receive it, open it, and claim it, because it belongs to you. I want to thank you also. I know my husband already did, but I want to thank you for your support. This church has always been a blessing to me. It's been my home. But we were overwhelmed by the fact that you would support us. It's a blessing to know that there are people behind you. We all need that. We need community. We need support. And we thank you. And we're going to believe you also for your prayer support, because we need that. Tonight, if you would stand for the reading of the word. I will be reading from Joshua chapter 2, verses 1 through 15. It's a little bit of a lengthy reading, but it should go fast. And Joshua the son of Nun sent out of Shittim 2 men to spy secretly, saying, "Go view the land, even Jericho." And they went and came into an harlot's house named Rahab, and lodged there. And it was told the king of Jericho, saying, "Behold, there came men in hither tonight of the children of Israel to search out the country." And the king of Jericho sent unto Rahab, saying, "Bring forth the men that are come to thee, which are entered into thine house, for they be come to search out all the country." And the woman took the 2 men and hid them, and said thus, "There came men unto me, but I wist not whence they were." And it came to pass about the time of shutting of the gate, when it was dark, that the men went out. Whither the men went, I wot not. Pursue after them quickly, for ye shall overtake them. But she had brought them up to the roof of the house and hid them with the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order upon the roof. And the men pursued after them the way to Jordan unto the fords. And as soon as they which pursued after them were gone out, they shut the gate. And before they were laid down, she came up unto them upon the roof. And she said unto the men, I know that the Lord hath given you the land, and that your terror is fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you, when ye came out of Egypt, and what ye did unto the two kings of the Amorites, that were on the other side Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom ye utterly destroyed. And as soon as we had heard these things, our hearts did melt. Neither did there remain any more courage in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and in the earth beneath. Now therefore, I pray you, swear unto me by the Lord, since I have showed you kindness, that ye will also show kindness unto my father's house, and give me a true token. And there we will save alive my father and my mother and my brethren and my sisters and all that they have, and deliver our lives from death. And the men answered her, Our life for yours, if ye utter not this our business. And it shall be, when the Lord hath given us the land, that we will deal kindly and truly with thee. Then she let them down by a cord through the window. For her house was upon the town wall, and she dwelt upon the wall. Jesus, I thank you, God, for your word. It is wholly anointed. We ask now, Lord, that you would break up the fallow ground of our hearts. Let our hearts become as fertile soil. Let your word fall therein as seed, and let it spring up to everlasting life. In Jesus' name we ask this. Thank you. You may be seated. I'm going to go on and read Joshua chapter 6, verses 22 to 23 and 25. But Joshua had said unto the two men that had spied out the country, Go into the harlot's house, and bring out thence the woman and all that she hath, as ye swear unto her. And the young men that were spies went in and brought out Rahab and her father and her mother and her brethren and all that she had. And they brought out all her kindred and left them without the camp of Israel. And Joshua saved Rahab the harlot alive, and her father's household, and all that she had, and she dwelleth in Israel even unto this day, because she hid the messengers which Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. We will never know or understand with full clarity how Rahab came to love, believe, or trust God enough to ask for deliverance, as the Bible isn't clear on that point. Obviously, as a harlot, she didn't know God. But something caused her to completely turn and put her trust in a God she did not know. Adam Clark's commentary conjectures that possibly it came through one of three ways, or maybe a combination. The knowledge of the one true God being general in the earth at that time. Isn't that incredible? I think about the knowledge of God being general in the earth. There's a lot of people in this time and age who don't even know God or believe in God. Number two, possibly through conversation with the spies. Although when we read the scripture, it sounds like she had some former knowledge. Number three, from a supernatural influence of God upon her own soul. What actually brought her to the radical decision to trust her life and that of her entire household to a God she obviously did not serve? I believe it was love. 1 John chapter 4, 16 and 17 says in the Amplified Translation, We have come to know by personal observation and experience, and have believed with deep, consistent faith the love which God has for us. God is love, and the one who abides in love abides in God, and God continually abides in him. In this union and fellowship with him, love is completed and perfected with us, so that we may have confidence in the day of judgment, with assurance and boldness to face him, because as he is, so are we in this world. So it says we have come to know by personal observation. That is about the only thing that could have convinced her, because she cites all the things that she heard. She observed them. She didn't necessarily experience them, only in the fact that she knew that other countries' kings had been defeated. And she knew that there was a fear that preceded and surrounded the children of Israel, a fear of God. Mankind feared because of what God did through them. And I want you to catch this and apply this to yourself, because people are watching you. It is your life and the fear of God that is on you. And they see also the blessings of God that can turn a person's heart to the place where they come and they recognize it, and they'll come to you. It's happened to me. I've watched you. I had perfect strangers walk up to me when I was a secretary for J.I. Case Company. I worked in product performance. First, I was a cashier in downtown office. Then I was out on, I believe it was Highway C. And total strangers that came into the office would say to me, and I'm not complimenting me, I'm complimenting God. It was an honor. I was awed. I was humbled by it. They'd ask me, they'd say, "You're a Christian, aren't you?" I'd say, "Well, yes, I am." And I was like, I was young. I was like surprised. I was like, I don't know these people. But they said, "We've been watching you. I thought you were." Jericho was about to be judged, and the love of God for Israel, which Rahab had heard of and was about to see, inspired confidence in her to have boldness and to cast her fear aside, to ask for protection, to find a refuge and a rescue in God's love. As 1 John 4:18 says in the Amplified Translation, "There is no fear in love. Dread does not exist. But perfect, complete, full-grown love drives out fear, because fear involves the expectation of a divine punishment. So the one who is afraid of God's judgment is not perfected in love. They have not grown up into sufficient understanding of God's love." So how could this be possible with a God she didn't know? Well, if we go on to 1 John 4:19 in the Amplified, the translation simply gives us the answer. We love because he first loved us. She saw the intense, consistent, confident love that God showed Israel. Even though she lived in deep sin, she saw and recognized what was going on around her. She had heard the stories. She saw the deliverance. She saw the rescue. And she made a wise decision. So in reading Joshua 2:8-12 again, which I will not do, we've already read it. You can put it up if you would like, Joshua 2:8-12. We see that Rahab came to learn of and place a confident trust in God, a God she never knew, because of what she had heard about God and what she had seen, not necessarily with her own eyes, but through the aspect that we know you totally defeated Sihon and Og. We know how God parted the Red Sea for you. You like everything you do is like touching gold. Like it just turns out for you. God cares about you and is watching out for you. The same God that fought Israel's battles and gave them victory is the same God we serve today. Rahab saw time and again how the God of Israel loved and protected them, and because of this witness, she was willing to place her faith in that God. Because of the testimonies of the children of Israel, Rahab was able to come to the place of placing her life in God's hands and making a covenant to save herself and that of her family. I want to encourage you tonight that you never know what influence and effect your testimony is going to have on those around you. When you least think you're being watched, you would be surprised. When you live in obedience to God and He performs your rescue and deliverance, how many here have been rescued and delivered by God? I have, big time. I'm sure we all feel that way. When you live in obedience to God and He performs your rescue and deliverance, others see this and they come to realize that they too can come into covenant with this God of love and protection. When we were home missionaries and my husband, he had to work because we went to a town where there was no church. We had to dig it out from zero. So he worked full time, and then we were like pastoring full time as we tried to win souls and get a place that we could hold service and all the things that go with it. And so occasionally, I would come in and help him at work. And the way I helped him was I would face the shelves. So one day I was in there and I used it as a witnessing tool because our children started out in public school. We ended up homeschooling them. But while I would only be gone during public school hours, I would take them to school, drop them off, and if I wasn't required there or a volunteer situation of some sort, I would come and I would work. So one day I'm working with Kim, a female worker, and I had been witnessing to her. And then John was another worker. We were all, the load had come in, we were all in the aisle, and we were facing and stocking shelves. And so John was on his knees doing a lower shelf over here, and Kim was to my right, and I was putting up salad dressing bottles. And you know, they come in those boxes with that little cardboard accordion to keep them from clinking and clanking into one another. So we were talking and having a good time, and of course, when customers came by, we quieted down and behaved ourselves. And so I looked down the aisle both ways, nobody was there. I pulled that little accordion thing out of the box, and I just, you know, if you go like this, it becomes an accordion. So I was going like, dee, 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 and I was just kind of dancing around with that thing. And Kim's laughing, and John, he's down there, and he looks at me and says, okay, share. What are you on? And I said, Jesus? And he said, you know, I thought you were going to say that. Do you know that that young man came to church? And I've never in my life seen somebody run to the altar like he did. And he cried so hard. Tears were literally shooting straight forward out of his eyes when he was repenting. This is what I mean, that God uses you. People watch you. I didn't get to say much to him about God until he asked me what I was on, and I told him it was Jesus. Joshua 2:18 reads, behold, when we come into the land, thou shalt bind this line of scarlet thread in the window, which thou didst let us down by. And thou shalt bring thy father and thy mother and thy brethren and all thy household, thy father's household, home unto thee. I don't know about you, but what I'm seeing here is a hidden message that you need to be sure that that scarlet thread runs through your life, your home, and your generations. Everybody in your home needs to be under that scarlet thread. Do you remember the agreement? Everyone that was under that roof would be saved, so to speak. The scarlet thread needs to be over your home, and you need to gather as many in there as you can, because your home and everyone under it needs to be under the blood. I want to point out that because of this act of faith, Rahab is mentioned as being in the bloodline of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1, verse 1 and 5. Rahab saw that because God loved and protected Israel, she then could love him and trust that he would do the same for her if she'd but come to him. You can observe everything you want, but if you never come and you never make the covenant, it won't happen. It's incumbent upon each of us. We're responsible to come to Christ, to reach out to him, to make that covenant with him, to place a complete trust and faith and belief and confidence in him. I have been in some very, very dark situations in my 70 years of life, more than once. There were times I said, God, I don't think I'm making it out of this one. But I did. I'm here, I'm talking to you, and I'm alive, and I'm well. I didn't only make it, I'm thriving. And that's what Jesus Christ does. The word hope in the original Hebrew literally means cord. I call this Rahab's rope of hope, which brought her to love. Her realization that God loved her, and in turn, her love for God. You see, she had really made a covenant with God through the two spies for her protection and deliverance. Now, you don't make covenants for protection and deliverance with someone unless you love and trust them. Well, we know that's what a marriage covenant is. You didn't marry that person unless you loved and trusted them. She knew God, and she knew she could love and trust the one true God because she had seen him in action multiple times on behalf of Israel, and they were miraculous things. How many here have experienced miraculous things at the hand of God? Haven't we all? I have experienced, I have almost died 3 times, and God's kept me in my life. And the last time, I kind of asked him, I said, Lord, are you trying to tell me that you're done with me? Because if you are, I guess I'm done. Because you own me. I don't own myself. But if you're not done with me, I'm not done. I feel like there's more work I'm supposed to do. And I would sure like to be around for my husband and my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren. I've already claimed my 120 if I don't get raptured. And that night, after I fell asleep, as I woke up, God spoke to me in a dream, and he said, I'm not done with you. And a fever I had had for 14 days, and I knew how to break a fever. I was born and raised in a medical home, and I'm a natural health care practitioner. I knew what to do. I could not break it. Could not. I broke it. God broke it. And I was totally fine after that. Because of her step of faith, which brought her to rescue and deliverance, she's mentioned in Hebrews 11:31, what I call the Faith Hall of Fame. By faith, the harlot, Rahab, perished not with them that believe not, when she had received the spies with peace. So if I could have the ushers pass out the rope of hope. Every adult needs to get a rope of hope. We all need rescued in our lives, even if we're saved. Don't we have situations that arise that we need to be rescued from. We need deliverance. We need God to intervene somehow, some way. And we all know someone else who needs to be rescued also. If the musicians could come. From weakness, sins, culture, circumstances beyond their control. Maybe it's marital heartache. Maybe it's financial distress. It could be all kinds of things. Health problems. There is a God who delivered Israel from everything. And I know he can deliver you. He has done, if I told you some of the miracles he wrought in my life, and I told him, I had a sister who was backslid for 22 years. And I said, God, I am going to wrestle with you as Jacob did at the brook of Jabbok. I will not let go of you till you save her, you bring her back. I've got to see her in heaven. And do you know what? After 22 years, he did it. He brought her back. Unfortunately, she passed. But even then, when she was dying of cancer, a year and a half later, I begged God to please, she was the sister I was closest to please heal her. And he said, no, I'm going to give you your wish, your prayer. You said you wanted to see her on the other side. Barbie tried to come back twice. She never made it, but this time he said she's doing really good. I'm going to take her. She's going to be safe. And I had peace after that. Was it hard? Of course. There's times I still miss her, and I'm like, Barbie, wish she were here. But she's safe. She's in the place I want her to be. If that means she's going to make it, she needs to be there. So I'm going to ask you all to stand. And I would like you, please, everybody come as a family, as individual families. Please come forward and fill this altar. Bring your rope of hope. And you've each been given a rope of hope today to bring you to receive the love and the deliverance, the rescuing of God. What is it you need? What is it that's plagued you that you haven't been able to get past? What healing do you need? We had an opportunity tonight to receive it. If for some reason you were afraid and you didn't, let's all receive what we need tonight. I want you to, everyone, hold up and display your rope of hope to God. And I want you to say, Jesus, I need rescued, deliverance, healing, whatever it is, provision from you regarding this. Hold it up. Come on. Cry out to him. God needs to hear you speak it. Jesus, I need this from you. You're desperate. Hold your rope of hope, just like Rahab put it out there. She made a covenant with God. She made him promise, you're going to rescue and deliver me. I need rescued from this, Jesus. And allow Jesus to rescue you with his love and to remove your fears. Go ahead, brother.
You unravel me with a melody.
Come on, folks. God's right here ready for you. Ask him for what you need. He's waiting.
From my enemies.
He's waiting for you to reach out in desperation. When you get desperate with God, he hears you. Jesus, I need help. I need rescued. I need healing. I need forgiveness. I need salvation. I need financial help. I need, Lord Jesus, for my family to be together. I need my family to be healed. I need my marriage healed. God, I need a new job. I need financial provision. God, I want to be a soul winner. Give me a soul. I want to win someone for you, Jesus. Heal the wounds that have occurred in me since childhood, Lord. Heal me of all the things, oh God, that are binding me, holding me back, that are making me in bondage. Set me free from it, God. In Jesus' name. Go ahead and sing, brother. I want you to keep singing.
From my mother's womb, you have chosen me.